Trump administration is pledging to donate some funds, some of our taxpayer money, in rebuilding Notre Dame. Of course, the building was recently on fire. Luckily, the entire structure was not damaged, and the works of art within the building were saved. However, there is extensive damage, and it will take a considerable amount of money to save the structure, or rebuild the structure, I should say. And so as a result, the Trump administration has offered to donate some money to France. Now, this is okay, it's fine by me if we were taking care of our own, but we're not. So let me first give you the statements from Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Donald Trump, and then I'm gonna give you just a quick refresher on what's happening in the United States. Sarah Huckabee Sanders says the cathedral has served as a spiritual home for almost a millennium, and we are saddened to witness the damage to this architectural masterpiece. We stand with France today and offer our assistance in the rehabilitation of this irreplaceable symbol of Western civilization. Vive la France. Okay, and then you have Donald Trump, who says that is part of our growing up.
She can't even get through it.
Listen,
because that's how dumb the tweet is.
You know what?
She can't even finish reading it.
We should bring elementary school students to read this.
I know.
Can we just have puppet socks to read the bits that he's like?
Yeah, that is part of our growing up. It's a part of our culture. It's a part of our lives. That's a truly great cathedral.
Wow.
Okay, so that was Trump's statement on it. So, all right. The reality is there are a number of issues in the United States, and I'm not even, let's stay away from the poverty issue. That is a huge problem in the US. But let's focus on certain, let's say, projects that need to be funded, like the water system in Flint, Michigan, which continues to be a complete and utter disaster. It has not been fixed. They're still reliant on water bottles from Nestle, right? And so there are, of course, a bunch of other countries that are coming in and helping, not just countries, companies that are coming in and helping to rebuild and rehabilitate the cathedral. I have no problem with rehabilitating it. I have no issues with the cathedral. That's not the problem here. The problem is the lack of priorities here, right? The inability to take care of people who are really suffering because they don't have access to clean drinking water. Puerto Ricans who are still, being neglected by our federal government. These are Americans who are being neglected by our federal government. I mean, it's unbelievable. So let's go to graphic 36. Administration officials haven't issued rules and regulations to allow Puerto Rico to spend $28 billion in rebuilding funds for low-income areas that were approved last year. In 2018, the Department of Housing and Urban Development announced plans to allocate nearly $16 billion, including $8.3 billion earmarked for Puerto Rico. But the rules must be issued first, and that's according to a senior Democratic aide. Also, the remaining $77.7 million in federal funding for water infrastructure improvements has been released to Flint by the state. The funds are from a $120 million federal and state loan granted to Flint in March of 2017 by the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act of 2016. The funds support several Flint water infrastructure projects. So the money has been allocated, but it's still not being used to update the water system. I mean, it's been years at this point in Flint, Michigan.
It's absolutely ridiculous. And when the people of Flint, Michigan first heard that we were offering money to this cathedral in France, I'm sure they were like, how do you say WTF in French?
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me? It's literally been, as you said, years that Flint, Michigan people have not had clean water, years since Puerto Rico has not had their infrastructure fixed. Nebraska is underwater right now because of historic flooding. I mean, our country is a mess. Our bridges and roads are falling apart. We have our own problems.
Yeah.
I mean, it is sad and devastating about Notre Dame, but that is not our priority. That should not be our priority.
Exactly, and look, if France had trouble finding the money to rebuild the cathedral, that would be one thing. But right now, let me just give you some examples. They're getting donations from all sorts of countries and also all sorts of companies. Yeah, so the founders of French companies Louis Vuitton and Keurig have already pledged a combined 300 million euros for the rebuilding effort. That's just 2 companies.
Right, so it's an affront on multiple levels. So firstly, let's just take that last story with Louis Vuitton, which is part of a bigger company called LVMH. It's an affront to the Yellow Vests, the Gilets jaunes in France, who have been protesting every single Saturday for the last couple of months against rising fuel costs that they can't afford because they're getting bottomed out through austerity measures as well, and they have a higher standard for a social democratic country. And so they watch and see a kind of a French company, but all these companies are multinational corporations, donate that money towards the cathedral while actual people are starving and actual people have trouble getting by in France, in Paris specifically. And also it's hard to watch these global elites who in 24 hours could raise millions of dollars and somehow they can't in either Flint, if our state doesn't want to provide it. So again, it's like not America first, it's America second. It's actually white nostalgia first because they are referencing the Notre Dame as being important because it's an irreplaceable symbol of Western civilization. Flint apparently is not a symbol of Western civilization. Puerto Rico is not. The 3 black churches apparently for them were not. So they were burned and there was not that kind of online coalescing to raise the same amount of money. So that's what this story communicates is where the priorities are for the global elite and where the priorities are for this administration.
Amen.
Yeah.
I cannot snap that enough. I love that. White nostalgia first. Hashtag.
And there's a lot of that going on. And I just want to add that even though there has been funding allocated for improvements in Flint, Michigan, it's not nearly enough. So I mentioned the $120 million, right? It's going to take $300 million in capital improvements over the next 20 years, right? So we nickel and dime our own people and at the same time will offer these giant donations. And right now it's unclear exactly how much they're willing to give France to help rebuild the cathedral. But again, I mean, we keep having these arguments about we don't have enough money, we don't have enough revenue for healthcare for Americans or for improvements to the infrastructure or for improvements to water, clean water. But we have money for other things. We have $70 billion, right, for Trump's border wall.
Yeah. Right, and we also have the governor of Michigan who created this kickback system for Nestle to have access to the clean water source in Michigan, which is Lake Michigan, if I remember correctly. And that's why they were tasked to give water bottles because they're actually stealing the water that could go directly to Flint.
On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.